The Ottomans were renowned for having one of the most successful empires in history. Over the course of 300 years, they enjoyed an unprecedented period of growth. With their dynamic system of governance, they were able to effectively run and maintain their expansive realm. Constantinople's splendor was elevated to previously unseen levels as sultans commissioned works of art like the Suleymaniyah Mosque. Despite all of these sophisticated achievements, the Ottomans retained the old brutal practice of fratricide to decide who becomes the Sultan. This tradition was maintained well into their Golden Age, as the death of one Sultan threatened to throw the whole empire into chaos. This begs the question, why did a people who created such a well-run empire resort to such a primitive practice to decide who the supreme ruler would be? When the Ottoman state was first formed during the closure of the 13th century, the line of succession to the throne was not formally established. Instead of the seniority succession seen in many states during the era, the Ottoman state of the 14th century chose its leader based on their militaristic skills as a Ghazi warrior. Early Ottoman politics often saw members of the imperial dynasty sharing power within the state, harking back to the old practices of the Seljuk sultans of old. An example of this practice can be seen in the case of Osman Ghazi, the founder of the Ottoman state, who went on to appoint many of his brothers and nephews in important military and political positions in his wars against the Byzantines. His son and successor Orhan Ghazi would also follow in his footsteps by appointing his brother Alauddin to the office of Grand Vizier in order to settle domestic issues while he himself commanded the Ottoman military. However, this practice of peaceful transition of power would end with the accession of Murad I, as he would execute two of his stepbrothers after acquiring the throne. Although very little is known about this first Ottoman fratricide, it is suspected that the sons of Orhan Ghazi failed to reach a political arrangement like their forefathers, and potentially the two stepbrothers with their Byzantine benefactors entered into a power struggle against Murad, thus resulting in their death. Whatever the case, the Ottoman practice of fratricide was born. The practice would be continued with Sultan Bayezid I 2 decades later, as he would kill his brother in the aftermath of their father's death during the Battle of Kosovo, only hours after fighting side by side against the Serbians. This struggle to clear all claimants to the throne in the hopes of permanently holding on to power would be the main driving point in the early days of Ottoman fratricide. However, if the late 14th century was a time of expansion for the Ottomans, the early 15th century would be a time of rebuilding, as the Ottoman state was effectively thrown into years of political unrest caused by their major military defeat to the Timurids at the Battle of Ankara in 1402. The sons of Bayezid I would go on to fight in a decade-long civil war to see who would reign supreme over the empire, whilst at the same time the Byzantines began to harbour Ottoman princes within their walls in Constantinople as a way to gain further leverage over the ruling sultans of Edirne. Ottoman leaders during this era were well aware of the potential political consequences of rival claimants to their throne, which is why after the fall of Constantinople in 1453, Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II would officially legalize the practice of fratricide. He stated, "Of any of my sons that ascend the throne, it is acceptable for him to kill his brothers for the common benefit of the people. The majority of the ulama have approved this. Let action be taken accordingly." As a way to prevent the disastrous events of the early 15th century, the Ottoman sultans of the next 150 years would often begin their reigns by ordering the deaths of their brothers, as a way to prevent potential civil wars in the future. Due to its legal nature, the Ottoman Sultan would first obtain a fatwa from the Shaykhul Islam, the chief Islamic scholar of the empire, to legally execute members of the imperial dynasty. The fatwa would often justify the act of fratricide by stating that it was done in order to protect the empire's citizens from social upheaval and to protect the integrity of the state. Upon obtaining the fatwa, the princes would traditionally be strangled to death with a silk robe by a group of mute executioners. However, the issue of Ottoman succession would still be up in the air. By the 15th century, Ottoman princes at an early age were sent out on governorships across all of Anatolia by their Sultan fathers in order to obtain the administrative and military skills to one day rule the empire. During these formative years in their lives, Ottoman princes would compete against one another as they all tried to gain the favor of their Sultan father back in Constantinople, in the hopes of gathering enough political support for their candidacy for the Ottoman throne. The closer in proximity the Ottoman prince was stationed to the capital, the better the likelihood they had of reaching the capital first upon the death of their Sultan father, which is why the Sanjak of Saruhan, centered at the city of Manisa, was often seen as the governorship for the heir apparent prince. Although providing the empire with the best candidates for the imperial throne, this political arrangement by the Ottoman state would lead to major civil conflicts between the sons of the sultans throughout the 15th and 16th centuries. Since it was seen as forbidden for an Ottoman sultan to officially declare an heir, due to the Ottoman belief in divine providence in the selection of their rulers, Ottoman princes often directly competed with each other before and after the death of their father. To alleviate tensions between fellow princes, multiple Ottoman sultans like Mehmed II and Suleyman I employed the tactic of stationing their sons at equal distances from the capital in order to create a sense of equality and fairness for the race to the imperial throne. Perhaps the most famous throne race in Ottoman history came after the death of Mehmed II, which would see the eldest son, Shahzadeh Bayezid, delaying the news of his father's death to his younger half-brother Cem in order to reach the capital first and secure the throne for himself. What followed would be the largest Ottoman civil war since the Ottoman interregnum after the Battle of Ankara, and even with the end of the civil war, Bayezid II would spend a majority of his reign preoccupied with Cem, who was now a political prisoner to various European powers. The next major conflict between Ottoman princes would this time erupt towards the end of Bayezid II's reign, as he was the first sultan to officially declare an heir, his favorite son Shahzadeh Ahmed. With this single action, Bayezid II would plunge the empire into civil war as his sons would all vie for power for his throne. This would result in Shahzadeh Selim executing all of his brothers and nephews in his quest to become the Sultan. The last civil conflict between Ottoman princes would erupt during the reign of Suleyman the Magnificent. From the famous story of Shahzadeh Mustafa and his execution at the hands of his father, to the conflict between Shahzadeh Selim and Shahzadeh Bayezid, resulting in the latter's exile in Safavid Persia, the reign of Suleyman I would bring an end to an era in which Ottoman princes held major influence within the state. The next round of Ottoman fratricides would not be settled on the battlefields of Anatolia, but rather within the walls of the Topkapi Palace. Whilst the ascension of Selim II to the Ottoman throne was bloodless, the ascensions of Murad III and Mehmed III to the throne during the last decades of the 16th century would produce one of the darkest chapters in Ottoman history. When Mehmed III came to power in 1595, it would result in the death of 19 Ottoman princes, most of which were infants, thus making it the largest royal fratricide in the history of the empire. Unlike the fratricides of the 14th, 15th and early 16th centuries, which were highly romanticized within Ottoman society due to their nature of being decided on the battlefield, the fratricide conducted by Mehmed III was a breaking point for most people. The widespread belief in the capital of the imperial dynasty being in a state of moral decay was now confirmed in the eyes of many, as by that time an Ottoman sultan had not left the imperial palace at the head of an army for almost 3 decades. With the latest round of fratricides shattering public opinion of the royal dynasty, and on top of Mehmed III's sudden death, and the near extinction of the House of Osman, the Sublime Porte began to take direct control regarding the line of succession to the throne. In order to ensure the survivability of the dynasty, the life of the youngest of two remaining Ottoman princes was spared. Mustafa was closed off in the imperial palace under house arrest, whilst his 13-year-old brother Ahmed ascended to the throne. This system of house arrest would be known as the Kafes system, and it would last until the fall of the empire during the 20th century. Instead of being stationed in cities all across Anatolia in order to gain direct military and administrative experience, newer Ottoman princes were now subjected to live their lives within the walls of the imperial palace under the watchful eye of the Sultan. In addition to the Kafes system, a new line of succession law was passed by the Sublime Porte, declaring that the oldest member of the dynasty would now automatically be the official heir to the throne, and that the practice of fratricide was now deemed illegal. Although the practice would make short comebacks during the reigns of Osman II and Murad IV, from the middle of the 17th century onward, the practice as a whole was abandoned in favour of the Kafes system and succession by seniority. As brutal as Ottoman fratricide was, the original rationale for it was solid. One of the downfalls of hereditary lineages is that the principle of meritocracy is not a priority. Rulers are chosen by their blood rather than because they deserve to be so. And in the context of a job as difficult as a monarch, this is a recipe for disaster. The Ottomans sought to avert this by demanding that the fittest candidate for the throne win, instead of being handed it. But whilst this Darwinian principle makes sense in theory, in practice it has a number of flaws. First, every time a sultan died, the realm would have to brace itself for a civil war. Such periodic chaos would have been music to the ears of the empire's rivals. The Ottoman interregnum after Timur's invasion proved the disastrous consequences of this policy. Secondly, even if the empire could weather the storm of civil wars, somewhere along the way, the practice defeated its original point of deciding the most competent sultan. As the state grew, so too did the personnel responsible for making decisions, viziers, the sultan's mother and wife, as well as the janissaries. This resulted in a candidate being chosen who served the interests of certain individuals or groups better than that of the state. In the end, the Kafes system that replaced the fratricidal custom confirmed how the Ottoman state's original preoccupation with selecting the best candidate for the position of sultan was over.
Thank you guys for watching, and a special thank you goes out to my Patreons for continuing to support me financially. If you want to do so, click the link in the end screen or in the description to this video, and I would appreciate it a lot. Whatever contribution you can make, that would be awesome. Until next time, peace.